Today's webinar is spearheaded by our distinguished steering committee members, Stacy Lapierre, Risk Management Officer for Las Vegas Valley Water and Southern Nevada Water Authority, and Paul Fuller, CEO of Allied Public Risk. To guide us through today's complex subject, we have two experts who bring a wealth of knowledge and experience to the table. Our first presenter is Helen Kreger, Vice President, Senior Credit Officer in Moody's San Francisco office. She covers local government credits primarily in California, including enterprise systems, cities, counties, and school districts. In addition to her analytical work, Helen leads ESG scoring efforts for municipal utilities within the US and heads up Moody's Municipal Utility Task Force, supporting research and internal training for these credits. Helen serves as a rating committee member on credits nationally for sectors including local government, charter schools, community colleges, and healthcare districts. Our second presenter is Keely Brooks, Climate Change Policy Analyst for the Southern Nevada Water Authority. She manages and coordinates the climate science, policy, and adaptation efforts at the organization. Her expertise include climate change, paleoclimatology, geology, and climate adaptation in the Southwest US. Keely is the former chair of the Water Utility Climate Alliance, an organization comprised of 12 of the nation's largest water providers, formed to provide leadership and to collaborate on climate change issues affecting the country's water agencies. She is a co-author of the Southwest chapter of the 2018 National Climate Assessment Report. Without further ado, I'd like to turn this over to Stacy, who will be providing additional perspective on today's presentation and leading our discussion. Stacy, I don't believe we can hear you. No, we're having some sound issues. No. Okay, looks like Stacy is rejoining. Hopefully we'll fix the little technical glitch we have. Stacy, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me now?
Great, thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay, we'll try this again. Sorry about that. Thank you, Vlad. Welcome everyone to our Water Leadership Group webinar on climate risk. I'm excited to be a part of today's conversation because this is a topic that touches on so much more than just risk management. Climate change is touching many aspects of how we are doing business, including water operations, distribution, engineering, employee safety, capital planning, and finance, to name a few. Climate risk is truly an organizational risk that is in a state of evolving, and to be successful, we need to be evolving with it. The intention of today's webinar is to offer an opportunity to obtain a better understanding of how Wall Street is evaluating climate risk in our water districts, and how this risk is translating into our bond ratings. Our intention is also for you to be able to leave this webinar with a roadmap of best practices to have productive internal conversations so that you can gain support to build enterprise risk management programs that are right for your organizations. At the Las Vegas Valley Water District, we have been having the conversation about climate change and climate risk for over 20 years. While many of you may be at the beginning stages of ramping up these efforts, we have been leading this change with mitigation strategies for decades. We look forward to sharing our best practices with you, but first, it's important that we hear directly from Wall Street. Without further introduction, Helen Krager, we are honored to have you here today and are looking forward to a better understanding of how Moody's is evaluating climate risk in our water districts.
Thanks so much, Stacy, and I will share my slides. Hopefully it always takes them a bit to load, but at Moody's, we have long incorporated environmental, social, and governance risk factors into our credit ratings. But really stemming from investor demand, we're being much more intentional about that and attempting to really improve the transparency around that. So we are assigning specific ESG scores to any water and sewer issuer with over $250 million in outstanding debt. And for those with less than this amount of debt, we are still commenting specifically around each of those factors in our credit opinions. So I thought I would share with you today a little bit about what we mean when we talk about environmental, social, and governance risks, and the specific factors that we look at in those three categories. We'll take a look at scoring outcomes for the 209 water and sewer entities that we've scored. And I thought it would be interesting to take a quick look at Las Vegas Valley Water District and see how they score. So within each of the ESG categories, we have created specific items and risk factors that we evaluate and specific measurements around each of those. And it's important to note, I think, that for water and sewer utilities, we look at those under our private sector rubric. For a couple of reasons. One, so that they are comparable to investor-owned utilities on the municipal side. And secondly, because they are operating enterprises with the ability to raise rates and a customer base, we feel that those are more similar to our private sector enterprises as well. So what do we mean when we talk about environmental risk? Under each of the categories, we have 5 sub-factors that we look at. So under environmental risk, we're looking at carbon transition. How well are you prepared for future regulatory requirements or move in that direction? Obviously, we're looking at physical climate risk, your exposure to heat stress, drought, wildfire, sea level rise, floods. We're looking at water management and how you manage this resource. I think that it's important to note that risk of pollution and regulatory violations is included in this subcategory. So for sewer utilities specifically, that we see as a risk. On each of these categories, we are scoring, assigning scores of between 1 and 5. With 1 being it's actually a positive credit factor in terms of our evaluation, 2 being neutral, and then 3 moderate risk and on down the scale. So it's important to note that for sewer utilities, they can score no better than a 3 for environmental risks, even if there's no physical climate risks. And one of the reasons for that, the key reason for that, is that we see ongoing and unrelenting risk associated with discharge permits and, and potential violations in that category. Waste and pollution, we speak specifically to air and land pollution, which is not typically a factor for water and sewer utilities. And then natural capital is your impact on biosystems and natural systems around you. Again, not really so significant for water and sewer utilities. And moving on. Social risks. Here we're looking at customer relations. Right there, you'll see data security and customer privacy. Cybersecurity would fall under this heading. Human capital looks at your labor relations as well as your human resources practices. So if you're having trouble with a deep bench for talent, that's looked at under human capital. Demographic and societal trends, under this category, we look at affordability among other factors. We know that that's a concern for many utilities. Health and safety has to do with the health and safety of your workers. So not your customers, but your employees. And responsible production is obviously a key area of evaluation for water utilities. This across sectors has to do with your product quality, whatever you're producing. For water utilities, it's obviously the water that you are producing for your customers. And again, for water utilities, they can score no higher than a 3 in this category because, again, of the ongoing and unrelenting exposure to challenges around water quality. For both environmental and social risk, your weakest score carries the day here because if we don't see strengths in other areas offsetting the risks in any particular category. So even if you have great customer relations, that doesn't offset risks associated with responsible production. And then governance. Here we're looking at financial strategy and risk management. Water and sewer issuers, you generally score fairly well in this category because of the extensive capital modeling and multi-year planning in which you engage. We're looking at your management credibility and track record. What are your regulatory relationships? Are you consistently publishing the required reports under that? Organizational structure, how are you organized? Compliance and reporting is fairly self-explanatory. And then board structure looks at how your board is comprised and how it sits within a government entity in which you may be a part of. So are you under a city council, for example, that's subject to political pressures? Again, in each of these categories and for each of the 5 subcategories, we assign scores ranging from E1 to E5 or S5 for each category. One thing that it's important to note, I think often we're used to thinking of a grade point scale with 3 being a C or fairly negative. In our view, a 3 really is moderate risk. And so you'll see a lot of 3s in our scoring that really just point out where the risk is. And then we take those scores and those then translate to a credit impact score. So how those factors are impacting your credit rating. And I'll move quickly on here. If we take a look at the water and sewer entities that we've scored thus far, you'll see that for many, 131, the credit impact of ESG factors is neutral, although there's a significant share for which those factors do entail a moderate risk. The predominant risk obviously being environmental, with some actually having quite, more negative environmental risks, often having to do with lagging compliance with consent decrees or other factors. And social risks, affordability, primarily, I would say, among those present a risk for utilities. But generally speaking, on the governance side, that's an area of strength with some 1 scores or neutral scores as well. So within each of these categories, environmental risks, again, water management for sewer utilities, that scored no better than a 3. Under social risks, responsible production is a factor for water utilities, with some demographic and societal trends weighing negatively regarding affordability and some management and sort of replacement concerns in terms of human capital. But governance, again, is an area of strength, especially in financial strategy and credibility. And not surprisingly, we see that for those issuers with higher credit ratings, that's affiliated and consistent generally with more positive ESG scores. So quickly, before I cede the floor, we'll take a look at Las Vegas Valley Water District, which I think is a great example for how this plays out in terms of your rating. So it's a AA1 stable rating, very highly rated. Credit impact of ESG risks for Las Vegas are at the moment neutral, despite the fact that obviously there are environmental risks all around physical climate risk. That's scored at a 3 and has, of course, specifically to do with the heat risk challenges and drought challenges that are present. Because it is a water utility, the social score again is a 3, because in comparison to other sectors, pharmaceuticals or auto, we see responsible production for water quality as being an unremitting challenge. So no violations or concerns presently, but just a moderate risk always into the future. But on governance, 1 scores where it's actually positive for both financial strategy and management credibility, and that address specifically what management is doing. For many municipal issuers, board structure and policies is a 3, again, because some of the political risk exposure. And then taken all into consideration, you'll see that, and we'll hear more about this, but the strong governance, the strong planning, the intentional work that the district is doing to offset environmental and social risks, then neutralize ESG factors in terms of the credit impact to the rating. So I will stop there. I'm happy to take questions at the end, though.
Okay, thank you so much for that insight, Helen. We appreciate the transparency so that we can ultimately better serve our communities. There's a direct link between managing bond rating risk and delivering affordable water. So that makes navigating climate risk and ESG a priority for all of us. It's clear from Helen's comments that we need to be addressing climate risk from a multi-pronged approach. And this echoes that this is an organizational risk that needs to be addressed with an enterprise risk management solution. Our entire organizations need to be engaged with this solution. When you engage your organization in an ERM effort, this is what it might look like. Water resource planning, including climate forecasts into planning scenarios, adapting operations and employee safety programs, capital planning with actionable projects to protect and innovate infrastructure, community engagement to gain partnership to address climate change as communities, intentional internal communications, reinforcing this organizational risk is impacting all departments, increased finance department communication to transparently share financial data supporting mitigation efforts. Dedicated staff. You may want to consider staff dedicated to the science and innovation for solutions, and your risk management departments actively working to identify, mitigate, and transfer emerging new risks from climate change. This includes understanding how multiple insurance policies can be triggered by a single climate event, and working in partnership with brokers and insurers to navigate new insurance products as they may become available. The Las Vegas Valley Water District is the largest member organization of Southern Nevada Water Authority, and we work in step in our efforts to address climate risk. With this, I'm excited to introduce Keely Brooks, a dedicated climate change policy analyst, to share our best-in-class, multi-pronged approach to serve as a roadmap for your organization to develop ERM programs.
Thanks, Stacy. And so just give me 1 second and I can share my slides. All right. So are you seeing my my title slide? Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Well, thank you everyone, and thanks for hopping on to talk about this important topic. Actually, this was the first time I've seen the breakdown of the Las Vegas Valley Water District's score for the AA1 stable. So that was really informative for me. I'm excited to see that. My background is, as was discussed, more on the science, the geology, and the environmental risks that our organization is facing. But I am very happy to mention that we do have our finance folks on the line, our CFO and another gentleman that's in charge of our bond rating as well. So if there are questions afterwards that have to do with that, I'm hoping I can defer to them because that is not my area of expertise. So what I was going to talk to you about today is how we are addressing climate change risk at the Southern Nevada Water Authority. So just to back up, back in 2010, I was hired specifically to help the organization identify and develop solutions to address climate change risks. And this decision was top down. It was identified as important to our senior management, executive management, and that just demonstrates the seriousness that they took this topic. So first, I wanted to give you a little bit about our system. The Southern Nevada Water Authority's a wholesale water provider to 7 different member agencies. As Stacy mentioned, the Las Vegas Valley Water District is our largest member agency. We deliver the most water to them, but we are very much in lockstep with our member agencies on our regional kind of approach to risk. And so SNWA is our mission is to provide world-class water service in a sustainable, adaptive, and responsible manner to our customers through reliable, cost-effective systems. And I'm pointing to this because I wanted to draw your attention to the fact that even in our strategic plan, in our mission statement, having a focus on sustainability, sustainable water, and a focus on being adaptive to changing climate conditions is baked in to that strategic roadmap. So we serve our 7 member agencies make up approximately 2.3 million people, residents in this Las Vegas Valley area. You can see where we're located in the inset map, and 40 million visitors annually. So quite a number of people that we serve. For infrastructure, we manage 3 water intakes where we withdraw water out of Lake Mead, and then we pump to our drinking water facilities. We have 2, and we have about a 900 million gallon per day capacity to treat and convey. Then we are responsible for managing the infrastructure for the pumping stations to move that water up 2,000 feet. There's tens of major reservoirs, large pipe transmission laterals that are shown on this inset, and those show where we turn out to our retail customers, the 7 member agencies. For scale in 2023, we treated and delivered approximately 132 billion gallons of water. And I also wanted to mention that in addition to maintaining this existing infrastructure, we have a $3.2 billion major capital and construction plan laid out for the next 10 years. So we want to ensure that as we are developing the designs and constructing that infrastructure to ensure reliability, redundancy, and resilience, that we're doing it in a way that is very much aware of climate change risk in the future. So that's kind of our overall regional system. We get our water supply from essentially we're nearly fully dependent on a single water resource, the Colorado River. And that resource is being impacted by climate change in a very visible way. This picture is showing Lake Mead, where the Colorado River, where we withdraw the Colorado River water. And you can see that there's a bathtub ring that is the demarcation of how much our reservoir has declined from the high levels. It's about 150 to 170 feet that it has declined. So it's a very visible reminder of the risk, the environmental risk that we face in our community. And because it is 90% of our supply that puts us at a high risk. The other 10% comes from local groundwater. On the demand side, most of our water is used outdoors. So 60% is used to irrigate our landscapes, primarily grass that has a big water demand. And then the 40% that is used indoors, we actually have quite a unique system where nearly all of that's used indoors is recycled and reused. It's delivered to a wastewater treatment plant. It's treated to tertiary high advanced treatment, and we meter how much we discharge back into Lake Mead, and we're allowed to withdraw the same amount out of Lake Mead. So that really is essential in extending our regional resource. The outdoor water use, however, is lost to the environment and cannot be reused. So through evaporation, transpiration, we lose that. This is also the aspect of our water demand that is most susceptible to climate impacts through warming. So on that topic, as I already alluded to with our Colorado River water supply, in the future, scientists have estimated that for every 1 degree Fahrenheit warming, that we can expect our stream flow in the Colorado River to be reduced by about 5%. So we are facing a shrinking water supply because we know that warming is expected to continue in the future. Additionally, with increased warming in the future, our water demand, we anticipate, and we are planning for upward pressure on water demand from increased evaporative demand. So in other words, the grass is going to require more watering, more irrigation, and additionally, we anticipate a longer growing season as it warms. And then finally, as I alluded to with that picture with the big bathtub ring and the dramatic drop in our reservoir of Lake Mead, this is a threat to our infrastructure and access to our main water supply. This picture shows how one of our 3 intakes was exposed back in 2022 when we were at an extreme low. And that's just demonstrating the reality that we are facing today and expect to be worse in the future. So now I want to pivot to what we're doing. What are our strategies to address this? So number one is we use multiple scenarios to plan for the future, and we are required to develop a 50-year water resource plan and then evaluate it every year and make adjustments if there have been major changes in the conditions of our community. So the benefits of using a multiple scenario approach is that we have these key uncertainties, which I mentioned. Hydrology, we can't expect hydrology in the Colorado to be the same as it's been in the future. We know that we're facing shortage volumes on the Colorado, and then we also know that we may be experiencing fast growth rates in depending on economy in Las Vegas, or we could have a slower population growth rate. And then finally, the other big uncertainty for us is how effective our conservation programs are. We have set a goal of 86 gallons per capita per day target by 2035 as in order to ensure that we are able to meet the needs of our community, regardless of the hydrologies in the future and regardless of the shortage volumes and population. And so by having multiple scenario approach, we can have a kind of a rosy picture of what these uncertainties how they might unfold in the future, and a more worst case scenario, which would be, you know, extreme warming, extreme lows of hydrology, et cetera. And then we have a plan for each. So we know exactly what we're going to do given those situations. And the graphic on the right is showing you just the example of kind of what is considered the worst case scenario out of our 2024 plan. And you see that there's a very tiny sliver of brown that says other future resources that is identified out in 2070. And what that is saying is that even in the worst case scenario, we have a plan in place to be able to provide water resources no matter what. And that's the first time we might need to have future resources. So that gives us plenty of time to plan for these future resources. The other benefit of evaluating our water resource plan every year is that it allows us to be flexible and adapt if conditions in the community change, if there's a dramatic change or shift in our population trajectory, et cetera. So that really allows us to be more adaptive. Secondly, just like a prudent financial planner, we have a savings account. We have been banking water for that rainy day, but in this case, very dry day, where we might need some extra resources. And this is just demonstrating that over the years, SNWA has accrued more than 2.3 million acre feet of water through 2022, and that's about 10 times what we used in a single year in 2022. So that's about 10 years of supply and banked water that we'll be able to use. Third is a very important lever that we use and that I've already alluded to in our approach to risk, and this is conservation. Back in the late 1990s, we realized that our outdoor water use was the largest consumptive use, and that we needed to, in order to stay within basically our water budget, we wanted to reduce consumption by reducing the amount of grass that we had, because that was our biggest user of water. And so we started implementing a program where we would pay people. We used the carrot to incentivize people to remove their grass and replace it with desertscape and drought tolerant, much lower water using desertscapes. And that was very successful. And but as we've progressed through time, we've realized that we've gotten to a point where we need to start using more sticks, if you will. So we are doubling down on cash incentives to incentivize people to remove grass in the community, but we're also now relying on legislative action and regulatory mandates. Now we are restricting, and so we pass legislation to say the community is no longer allowed to have what's called non-functional grass, non-functional turf. What that is grass that is, for instance, it can be grass in the center median of a roadway, or it's in a roundabout, for instance. It's grass that nobody's going to be walking on except for the landscaper that's mowing it. So that is a little bit more challenging, and it will affect the bottom line for communities that are required to remove non-functional grass by the end of 2026. So that's more of an example of the stick that we are starting to rely on. Another example of the stick is we have implemented a large water user policy. And what that means is if an account exceeds a certain threshold of water use in a given month, they will be hit with a fee, and those fees are pretty high. And to avoid hurting our customers that maybe don't have the means to pay these expenses. We are doing everything that we can do to give warnings in advance of these fees. And the positive about this policy is that we are receiving, or most people and accounts are addressing the large water use within that 30-day period, and they're fixing the leak. So that's become a stick, but I think it's become an effective stick that we're using. And then we have a long history of working with development and in limiting the amount of grass that are allowed in new development. We've enhanced that to now limit all new grass. So again, we're starting to get more strict on those development codes. We also put a standard restriction on pool size. And then finally, I just want to mention this because it's really important. Las Vegas is recognized as one of the fastest warming communities and cities in the US. And so our policies or our programs to remove grass has always required that it's replaced with 50% vegetative cover. So we're not just, clearing the way and adding asphalt to increase urban heat island. We are actually ensuring that there's vegetation to keep that temperature down. But on top of that, we realized in a recent study that adding tree canopy, more so than say the shrubs will help add more cooling benefit. And so we're giving even more of a cash incentive to add trees and to preferentially plant trees because that has even more cooling benefit. And so across these different policy and programs, these are the tools that we're using to eventually get to our goal of reducing per person water use in the community down to 86 GPCD. And so I wanted to demonstrate that not only are we doing all these programs, but it's really showing results. And this is a graph just showing that, back when the mega drought started in 2000, we were at 211 GPCD. And in the most recent year in 2023, we actually hit 89 GPCD. Now our goal is that 86 GPCD out by 2035. So you can see we're very much on track to hit our GPCD goal. So that decline is well over 51% over that time period. So this stuff works. What we're doing is working. Next, I just want to address the infrastructure challenge. So in 2015, the board approved construction of a new low lake level pump station to secure access to water supplies during extreme drought conditions that we're facing now. They also approved a rate modification to fund its design and construction, and it was completed in 2020. So I just wanted to draw your attention to this. So this is a schematic showing where our intakes are. The current level where it shows dead pool at 895 feet, that is not our current elevation. Don't want you to freak out. That's not the current elevation. We're higher than that. It's about 1075 right now. But this is demonstrating that by constructing this lake level pump station, we're able to access water even if elevations drop to the point where we're no longer to produce power out of Hoover Dam and release water through the dam through the penstock power production. What that means is that in essence, we are one of the most water secure cities in the Southwest that rely on the Colorado River. And so up until this point, I have focused on really the challenges for SMWA and our community and how it's impacting our water availability. But this is a much bigger challenge than just what Las Vegas is facing, right? And so in order to solve a challenge like this, it requires working with partners. So for example, if Las Vegas didn't exist and all of our member agencies didn't exist, we didn't divert water out of Lake Mead, it would only probably save about 4 feet, 3 to 4 feet elevation in Lake Mead. So if you recall, I said Lake Mead has dropped between 150 and 170 feet. So 3 to 4 feet is like a drop in the bucket. It wouldn't matter, you know, whether we existed or not. So it's extremely important that we actually address the larger issue of the system, and we're doing that through partnerships with our Colorado River stakeholders. So there's 7 different basin states and Mexico that all depend on the Colorado, and through through agreements and programs to conserve across the basin, we've been able to actually save 91 feet of elevation in Lake Mead approximately as of 2022 because of these agreements. The only way that we're going to solve the larger issue on the Colorado is through these partnerships. Okay, so I've talked to you about all of these strategies to solve some of these issues, but we need to have consensus. We need to have agreement from the community, from our governance structure, our board, in order to move forward with these solutions. So we start at the beginning with a citizens advisory committee. Anytime there's a condition, a change, a challenge in the community that requires a big decision. So for instance, the decision to construct the low lake level pump station. The way that we started that conversation was we brought the Citizen Advisory Committee together. It's a cross-section of business representatives across the community, as well as regular residents. The staff of SNWA then provides them the context of the challenge that we're facing, the risk to lake elevations dropping, then a series of options that they could decide to move forward with. The Citizens Advisory Committee then develops a list of recommendations based on this information, and they provide that to our elected board. So the way our governance structure works is the 7 member agencies of SNWA each has an elected board member. They make up our board of directors. So the Citizens Advisory Committee then makes recommendations of how we move forward. In the case of the low lake level pump station, they recommended moving forward on construction, and they also recommended that we needed to adjust our rate structure in order to pay for the construction. And the board then directs our SNWA executive team and staff to move forward with those decisions. Finally, I wanted to also mention that engagement process with the public, with our board, with the community is ongoing. So even after those decisions have been made and we are given direction to move forward, we have board meetings that are also public that give regular updates on the status of the condition of the Colorado River and what the outlook is going into the next water year. And also, if there's any agreements with our partners about solutions, they're given updates on that. They're also given updates on whether we're hitting our conservation targets. We keep close watch on that, and it shows, are we hitting our targets? And so in that way, in the board meetings with the public, we keep them abreast on an ongoing basis of this very real risk. And then finally, I also wanted to mention that we are very transparent about this risk, as well as the solutions and actions that we've taken to address and make us more resilient in our financial documents. We have a section specifically on the Colorado River in our official bond statements, as well as a climate change disclosure in that bond statement as well. We also include the same kind of information in our annual budgets, as well as our comprehensive financial reports and in our major construction and capital plan. So we try to be extremely transparent about these risks, what we're doing about it, and we get the public engaged from the beginning. And through these means, we build support and consensus on how to move forward. And then how do we fund it? Okay, I promise I'm almost done. So this is a huge question, and the authority has a diversified revenue stream and portfolio in order to be positioned to weather reductions in our water sales from drought and economic downturns. I bring this up because we experienced a situation during the Great Recession that I wanted to share with you. Back then, our philosophy was that growth should pay for growth. So we had our revenue streams was we had a sales tax revenue, we had a new connection charge fee. So that's when new developers come in, they pay fees. And then we had a wholesale delivery charge. So that's volume, right? So that's how much we sell to our retailers. Now, we had the downturn happen and suddenly we had nobody coming into the valley. Nobody was moving in. So our connection fees went down. And then we had, we have conservation programs, but we also had a decline in our wholesale delivery. So that's our product that we sell. So we had a shrink of those two primary funding sources. And we realized at that point, moving forward, we really needed to diversify our portfolio in order to weather those kind of perturbations in the economy, as well as when we need to crank up conservation and we're selling less water, we need to be resilient to that. And that's where this fixed infrastructure charge came in. You see that on each account has that on their bill. And then we also have a commodity charge, a reliability surcharge, and then we also rely heavily on federal and state grant funding as well. And that shows that they are really supportive of our resilience efforts, and they've provided us over $71 million in grants for resilient actions. And I wanted to say, despite having all of these different charges, our rate structure, so affordability, is very much, we're in the, if not middle to the bottom tier in terms of how much our rates are relative to other agencies across the country. So our water is fairly cheap when it comes down to it. Oops, I went the wrong way. And then, so just in conclusion, so we've spent decades preparing for climate change to ensure reliability in our region. And so these were just kind of the themes that I brought up from scenario planning, saving water, banking water, conservation to really do that demand management, ensuring that we're prepared in advance for infrastructure and building resilient and redundant infrastructure, engaging in partnerships with our peers to come up with solutions, and then really bringing the public in to build consensus and trust and transparency all along the process to build consensus for solutions, and then having a very diversified portfolio so that we can weather, so that we can fund our solutions as well as weather perturbations in the future. And then finally, because I know that Stacy is going to talk a little bit or show something now, I wanted to just mention that in addition to involving the public from the beginning to get on board with our solutions, it's also important that we get them engaged to take advantage of and participate in our conservation programs. And I just want to shout out to our public information and media folks. They do a great job to get noticed. And this is an example of one of our ads. It says, "Get your head out of your grass." And it shows a family with her head stuck in the grass. And then it says, "Let's face it, it's still a desert out there. Using less means more. Replacing your lawn with water smart landscaping is the right thing to do." So we put a lot of effort in that, and it's really catchy. And I think it's leads to a lot of participation in our programs. So now I can end here. So I know I took more time, but thank you.
Thank you very much, Keely. Essentially, you showed us the roadmap to an ERM program. While drought may not be the climate risk your water district is facing, this roadmap can be used as a guide to develop a custom plan for your organization. Worth noting again, the investment in hiring someone like a Keeley with dedicated talent is one of the keys to a successful program. One last thing before we open it up to Q&A. Like Keeley mentioned, we would like to leave you with a quick video as an example of how we are doing community outreach to change behaviors on climate risk. Having this community support is essential to an ERM program.
Hey, Southern Nevada. Yes, we see what you see, less water at Lake Mead, and you're concerned about our future water supply. Let's explain what the Southern Nevada Water Authority has done to secure water delivery over the long term while Lake Mead is at historically low levels. The mega drought gripping the West means the Colorado River, our main water source, is producing less drinking water. Our share of the river is only 1.8%, the least of the 7 states and the country of Mexico that all share this resource. The drop that you see in the lake is primarily due to less water being released from Lake Powell, coupled with summer water demands of downstream uses like agriculture. More than 20 years ago, SNWA recognized the possibility for this exact situation and acted quickly to make sure our water system meets the demands of our community. Southern Nevada will not lose access to water here at Lake Mead, even in extreme circumstances, thanks to new, unique infrastructure built specifically for our situation. The third intake is a straw that draws water from Lake Mead at its deepest point 3 miles into the middle of the lake, where water is its coldest and cleanest. The low lake level pumping station is the most powerful facility of its kind to move that water from the third intake to water treatment facilities and ultimately delivered to homes and businesses. If Lake Mead drops to a level we call dead pool, water can no longer flow through Hoover Dam. This would mean residents in Arizona, California, and Mexico would all lose access to the Colorado River. The third intake and low lake level pumping station are Nevada's $1.3 billion insurance policy. This infrastructure allows us to draw, treat, and deliver water from Lake Mead, even in extremely bad conditions. In a dead pool scenario, Nevada would be the only place with access to water at Lake Mead. And in this scenario, the federal government would still likely limit use, and we would still likely face reductions. We are secure, but to remain sustainable, conservation is critical. Southern Nevada has done a terrific job of conserving in the face of the megadrought. We have an 8-year supply of water in reserve, in part because of your efforts, but the job is not done. Learn more about our amazing conservation efforts and what you can do to help in our next video.
Okay, now I'd like to open up the floor for questions. Please feel free to speak up or drop a question in the chat. I do have a few questions in my queue. Keeley, this one's for you. Can you share the framework SNWA uses to track, monitor, and control climate change, as well as other organizational risks?
Yeah, sure. Stacy actually brought it up. So we use the enterprise risk management approach, right? So it's a holistic approach across the organization. It involved identifying risks that are not just environmental, but as Helen had pointed out, social, governance, brand, across the organization. For my role, I track in particular the risks from climate change. We use a performance index and risk indicators, and we track it in a software program called Origami. And then we also have all of the controls, in other words, mitigation strategies like conservation, partnerships, and we add those to that framework to show and demonstrate and keep track of everything we're doing to reduce and offset those risks.
Perfect, thank you. Helen, there's a question for you as well. Has there been some political pushback on ESG scoring? What are your thoughts on this?
Yes, it seems like everything in our world has become increasingly politicized, and so ESG factors has played into that. But at Moody's, we really don't see it as a political paradigm. We really, drought and heat stress and whether you've experienced floods isn't a political event. It's just something that happens. And so, just as these factors have been part of our scoring for a long time, or for part of our credit rating framework for a long time, they've been part of utilities discussions for a long time as well in terms of your capital planning. And I think it's just framing some of that planning, some of that, as Keely talked about, intentional communication with your customers and rate setting that frames that discussion.
Okay, Robert, I think Robert Clark, you have your hand raised. Did you have a question? Oh, we
Robert,
can't hear
you're
you.
muted.
Thank you.
We're not a wholesaler, but I'm curious about how big the Southern Nevada Water Authority is to have you employed there. We're definitely in need of something like this, but there's a group of us. We only have 54 employees, so we find it hard to really dive into things like this. But I was just curious, how many staff are at that organization that you support?
Sure. Okay. Yeah. So I think it's about 200. So definitely bigger
Okay.
than your
Yeah.
your entity. But I took up way too much time, so I didn't have enough time to reference some resources. But for folks, entities that may not have the ability to hire staff and build up their own program, there's you can turn to the Water Utility Climate Alliance. It's a group that we are founding member of. There's a lot of resources there to help folks get started on this. There's also the CREATE tool that we've worked with the EPA to develop, and that is it's a fairly straightforward tool that you can use to walk you through what are your risks. It gives you climate projections. It says these might be the things that you might be concerned with, and these are some examples of solutions that you could try. So it might be something that somebody you have on staff could look at.
Sure. I had a follow-up question to that. Do you offer assistance to your member agencies as well to help them create these same kinds of plans for their efforts? Or do they rely on their own selves to come up with these plans?
Well, so we are definitely in lockstep with our member agencies. We provide, so all of, like, for instance, the conservation policies and programs, these are our recommendations, and we get all of the member agencies to align their policies and programs with that. So they kind of follow our lead, so they don't have to recreate the wheel.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, Helen, I do have another question for you. Can governance and management compensate for environmental social risks?
And the answer to that is yes. I think we saw that specifically in the case of Las Vegas Valley Water District, but I also wanted to share some more cumulative data, and I'll go here, flipping through. So it's interesting to note that when you look at the credit impact that ESG factors have on rated entities, for those with a credit impact score of 1, meaning their credit rating is actually higher because of low ESG risks and positive actions in those areas, you see that it's over, while some of them have positive environmental factors, for example, environmental resources can sometimes be a positive to a credit rating if you're talking about Hawaii or a tourist location. But it's predominantly very strong governance. So a governance score of 1 that drives that credit support. And by the same token, those entities that have credit impact scores of 4 or 5 meaning that the impact of your ESG risk is negative and bringing down your credit rating, while clearly there are risk factors present in environmental and social. Again, for the majority, it's weak governance and weak responsiveness to those risks that drive a lower credit rating when ESG factors are taken into consideration.
Thank you for that.
So, yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, I'm done. So thanks.
Okay. You know, I'm just looking at the time, and in interest of everybody's time, I think we're going to wrap it up. But I would like to encourage, if anybody has follow-up questions, please feel free to reach out to our speakers directly. Helen and Keely, I think I speak on behalf of everyone that this has been a very relevant and engaging conversation. Thank you for sharing your time and your expertise. And I also want to thank everyone on this call today. Without your participation and collaboration, we would not have this platform to have these important conversations as they specifically relate to our water districts. We hope that you will join us next month in our open forum discussion for continued conversations. Vlad, I'm going to give it back to you for a final closing comment.
Thanks, Stacy and Paul. Again, thank you very much for organizing such a fascinating webinar. I want to echo Stacy's words and express our gratitude to the presenters and participants for joining us today. The challenge of climate change are more pressing than ever, from financial perspective described by Helen to operational described by Keely. And I think the impact on water and wastewater utilities cannot be overstated. The topic of climate change seems very broad and overwhelming, but I think together through meetings and discussions such as this one, we have the power to confront the challenge and share the tools to help us deal with it. And we would like to continue our discussion, so please, again, be prepared to discuss it at the next open forum. And if you're interested in learning more, we can definitely organize another session to cover this topic. Thank you very much, and we're looking forward to seeing you next month. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.